one of the hardest things that I think people face when they are struggling is this story that they tell themselves. Very often in life, we have a story that repeats, whether you're a victim, whether you're your hero of your own story. And it's very often the story that we see repeating. And being able to change that story is amazing because it gives the ability to you to move forward in a very different way. So one of the main things that we spoke about was meaning. For example, he would see a skyscraper and think, I used to own one of those. And then he'd feel bad, right? As opposed to giving it a different meaning of saying, that's fantastic, I could work towards it, or changing that meaning in a different way to allow him to experience different emotions.
Can you say that like a lot of what you're doing is actually changing the way your perspective and that story that you tell yourself? I mean, changing that to benefit yourself, right? Because a lot of times we get stuck in our own narrative and we believe what we, tell ourselves, even if it's really negative.
Yeah, most certainly. I think that when we look into our minds and how we're all programmed, generally speaking, for the majority of the human race, we realize that our minds are not built to be happy, right? We're built to survive. If you look at the generations with how we've been created, we're constantly looking for things that are wrong. So what happens is in a society where we're pretty much safe, we think about other things to protect ourselves. So it's actually going against the preconditioning of our mind to condition yourself to look for the things that are right, to allow yourself to move forward, and gaining those perspectives and catching yourself when you're doing something wrong really allows you to move forward in a much more sustainable way.
I think it's also really tied to like perspective, right? And mindset is really tied to what you view as your own identity, right? We get stuck. I feel like, and I've caught myself a couple of times in this, where you get caught up in your own identity and you believe that it's this, your fixed identity, this is who I am. And all of a sudden, all your beliefs and your entire outlook is influenced by that identity. So for example, the guy you were just talking about, his identity was this successful businessman, millionaire, whatever. So his entire outlook, whenever he looked at things, even if he had lost his fortune, was still, I'm a successful businessman, I should be having these things. These are things that I used to have or I lost. So I feel like a lot of it is like our identity should always be fluctuating, I feel. And we should be very self-aware about what we are. We are never fixed to any certain profession or calling. We're human beings, right? And we're going to be always influenced by our environment, things that happen around us, and our experiences. And those experiences are always going to change. So the way we view these things always has to be malleable and flexible to that. Otherwise, we're always going to be, in a way, going against the grain or fighting the current. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, most certainly. One of the phrases or terms that I've used to explain exactly what you're mentioning is an externally linked identity. Very often I see people linking who they are to something outside of themselves. For example, their business success, their marriage, their children, the amount of money in their bank account. And what happens is when you have something that you link to yourself outside of your control, it can fluctuate no matter what is happening. So very often when we're speaking about identity and we ask the question, who are you? I often flip the question round, and I think when someone asks, who are you? We very much look at the past to define who we are. Whereas if you always look to the past to define who you are, how could you be the person you need to be to live the life you want in the future? So one of the questions that I often pose to people is, who must you become in order to live the life that you desire? And what is very specific about that is about become and being. Very often people feel like they have to do a certain thing in order to be a certain way. And I challenge these people that we're a human being, not a human doing. And very often we can encapsulate those traits that we want to develop in the future right now, and it can enable us to move forward in a way where we are really experiencing life at a whole different level.